have much to say about the storyline at the moment because who of you watching this video has not already played Final Fantasy VII at least 20 or 30 times? Seriously, who out there doesn't somehow know the story of Cloud, Sephiroth, Aeris, or Aerith, depending on who you are, Tifa, Barrett, Nanaki, because I refuse to call him Red 13 because that name is just downright stupid, Cid, Cait Sith, Vincent, and Yuffie. Who doesn't know about Avalanche and Shinra, along with Cloud getting drunk in the live stream, and how Sephiroth is born from Genova as an experiment, and that Cloud is really best explained as a clone who is not really a clone with a huge identity crisis? Really, what explanation is needed here? So I will bypass storyline for now and bring it up again when I speak about my issues regarding this game. So let's talk about development instead, because I find that much more interesting. Final Fantasy VII was originally being designed as a 2D game for the Super Famicom, and was being worked on at the same time as Chrono Trigger. It has been stated that the game would have taken place in a modern-day New York City, but a certain game, Chrono Trigger, took away the attention from Final Fantasy VII. The setting was instead used in Parasite Eve, also for the PlayStation 1, and one of the antagonists that was planned to be used was actually used in Final Fantasy VIII, also better known as Sorceress Adea. When production started again, the story was meant to be more of a detective-styled storyline, where instead of blowing up part of Shinra at the beginning, you were going to be hunting the person who blew up part of Shinra instead. But obviously this idea didn't get finished, and we have the storyline of Final Fantasy VII that we all know to this day. Though some might ask why Squaresoft, a company that backed Nintendo for so many years, decided to go with Sony. Well, it isn't because Sony made them a better offer. I'll get that out of the way now. It was because of CDs. They had, at a time, planned to make this game's art style sprite-driven, but decided that the use of polygons would help sell the drama that they were attempting to drive. It was quickly realized that the baby cartridge system of Nintendo would not hold the game, which left only two options at this point: Sony PlayStation or the Philips CDI. As you can assume, the choice wasn't that hard to make. Sony was more than happy to welcome Square because they knew that, at least in Japan, there was a huge fan base for Final Fantasy, which would be good for their gamble system, the PlayStation. And it paid off in spades, with over 8 million copies sold worldwide, and a game that most definitely saved a console. When the game was finally released, it received immediate critical acclaim, and Final Fantasy VII was the first truly worldwide success for Squaresoft. Final Fantasy VII is the landmark game in the series for not only the game style, but also the soundtrack and everything else. Nobuo Uematsu went above and beyond when it came to the soundtrack. If nothing else, the song One Winged Angel is one of the most recognized works for Final Fantasy, and admittedly, one of the best songs ever created for the series. The gameplay overall was changed a bit as well. The battles are the same as they have always been. Two teams stand on different sides of the screen and take turns slapping each other, though there is much more to the gameplay than just the battles. We had the introduction of the Materia system. Materia is nothing short of condensed energy from the live stream, or mana, that carries magical properties, and when equipped allows the character to use magic, or grants other benefits such as the ability to attack multiple enemies at once. Materia was interesting because it allows you to build your team in the way you see fit. Yes, each character has their own strengths and weaknesses, and believe me, some of them are really useless, but you can make any of them fit on a team if set up correctly. Another thing that was introduced but was actually carried over into the next games was the Limit Break system. A Limit Break is a special ability that can be activated when a character takes enough damage. They end up becoming extremely pissed off and their power becomes ultimate for one turn, allowing them to either deal out massive damage or even fully restore the party. This was an element that is carried over into the next few games in the series but was implemented differently each time. Though we're not done yet with changes they made to the series. Let's talk about side quests. Yes, there were side quests in, say, Final Fantasy VI, but they felt more like part of the actual story and items that had to be done, except for the Doomgaze fight and the hunt for the dragons. Final Fantasy VII said, "Oh, you like side quests? Do you really like side quests? Then have a lot of them!" There are all kinds of side quests, from hunting down different weapons, aka the Emerald Weapon, Ruby Weapon, and Omega Weapon, to defending a Phoenix Egg and breeding chocobos. The good thing about the side quest is that the awards make them mostly feel worth it, though some of them are so annoying that many feel like when it's still. Take the Chocobo breeding side quest, which will allow you to get the ultimate summon Knights of the Round with a max damage output of 130,000 that in all honesty is weaker than Omnislash, which makes it completely unneeded, and the quest itself can take a couple of hours to complete. Side quests also can garner you 2 characters, such as the fan favorite despite him being mediocre in battle, Vincent the Vampire Not Vampire, and Yuffie, who really isn't worth it unless you want the most worthless character in the game. Yeah, I said it, she's worthless. She ends up stealing all of your materia halfway through the game and forces you to hunt her down. Now, I did mention summons, and really should speak about them for a moment. Square decided that a summon is really boring if they don't last at least 30 to 45 seconds. Knights of the Round last a total of a minute and a half. This led to one of my first issues with the game and the games that took inspiration from it. While seeing Knights of the Round, Bahamut, Neo Bahamut, and Bahamut Zero is really awesome the first few times, these animation times made it so I never wanted to cast a summon again, because you can't skip them and it caused battles to last way too long. The following Final Fantasy games took this cinematic style for summons as well and share this flaw in my opinion. Now, since I have apparently started my path down ranting lane, let me get everything out in the open, from the plot holes that really damage the game and the items I wish had never caught on. First off is the villain, and oh god, here it comes. Sephiroth, in all honesty, is a step back in the world of villains when it comes to Final Fantasy. When you compare him to Kefka, he just really doesn't stand up. We went from someone who did things because he was bored and crazy to a guy, in all honesty, was just a whiny child who was throwing a temper tantrum while dealing with a mommy complex that would make people like Norman Bates embarrassed and feel extremely uncomfortable. Even the Shinra president is a stronger evil because instead of just wanting to destroy the world because he got his feelings hurt, he wanted to rule everything, and despite his lack of superpowers, he felt like a bigger threat. The next issue is Cloud himself. He is nothing more than an emo character who becomes more emo as the game goes on. I'm sorry, this is not character development. Character development requires some kind of, development! We have seen characters make complete 180s and develop in the series, such as Cecil from Dark Knight to a paladin, or Terra starting off as well emo and becoming a strong independent woman that adopts a village. Then there is the fact that he has 2 love interests in the game between Tifa and Aeris. At different times he can be seen wooing both of them in his own special "I don't care about you" emo style. Though even after Tifa spends time caring for him when he is drunk on livestream energy, what does he do when he wakes up? Whine about Aeris to the woman who waited on him in his time of need. He also spent quite a bit of time impersonating a first-class soldier and stole the man's identity. Lastly, Cloud is an emotionally dead person who can't even show emotion when one of his 2 love interests dies right in front of him, which I will now talk about in length. Aeris always was and always will be a pointless character. She seemed to be placed in the game for the sole purpose of being a plot point, and they did that on purpose. That was her purpose in the game. But I want to focus on the death heard and felt around the world, and why it really doesn't stand up that well, and, for lack of a better term, a game theory of my own that made a few Final Fantasy fans angry at me at an anime convention a few months back. To the members of the jury, I present evidence A. The characters in Final Fantasy are gods. They are constantly being shot in the face with guns, sliced and slashed to bits with swords and other knifey-like objects. There is even a death spell that can kill you outright, yet they always come back to life or get healed in an instant with a life spell, a curing spell, or an item. This evidence shows that there is no reason for death within the world of Final Fantasy. Evidence B. There is a Phoenix down in a room that they have to pass through to get into the screen for Aeris to die. So there is no excuse for them not to have a reviving item. Now you might say, how does this prove that Cloud killed her and not the big bad guy with the majestically flowing hair and fire fetish? Take into account these next pieces of evidence, if you will. Cloud was standing no more than 5 feet away as Sephi was dropping from a very high position. Can you seriously tell me that within the amount of time that he was coming down, Cloud did not see him and couldn't have pushed her out of the way? No, I dare say that Cloud ignored him and decided to let Sephiroth stab the dear woman. The next item in this is that the stab itself would not have killed her on the spot, as it has been shown. She was not stabbed in the lung or the heart, which would have caused a quick death in all honesty. She was clearly stabbed in the stomach, as science suggests is not a fatal wound, as it can be fixed either surgically or even magically when you take magic into consideration. Now don't say to me, what if Cloud didn't have a way to heal or revive her? I have already stated that there is a Phoenix down in a previous room they had to pass through, and he starts the game with a cure materia. So he had plenty of options for both healing and or reviving her if she had passed over. Then take notice of the water that she was buried in. The water comes up to Cloud's waist, and she sinks into the water, and as far as I know, dead bodies don't just sink without help. Dead bodies float, as does any prone body without help, and that is why gangsters would always fit you with concrete shoes, to make sure you sink to the bottom where you can't be found. Because you see, a body, when it still has air in the lungs, will not sink, because air actually causes buoyancy, which will cause a body to float. The only reason that a body will sink in the water of its own accord will, one, be because the air has completely escaped the lungs, they're no longer causing buoyancy, or two, water has been able to seep into the lungs in a fashion that would destroy the buoyancy of the air. And the only way that would have happened for Aeris is if had Cloud held her head under the water long enough for her lungs to fill up. With this information, Aeris would not have died for any reason unless Cloud drowned her purposefully. We also cannot deny the fact that Cloud had ample time to stab Sephi right in the gut while his sword was in Aeris' body and he was laughing maniacally. He was kneeling, which meant he would have been able to give him an immediately fatal stomach stab if Aeris' injury is proof of death. This whole scene was stupid, but this is just a theory. A game theory, if you will. Now, outside of the items I dislike about the story itself, such as the ones I just described, there is also the fact that everyone is apparently a clone of a clone of a clone. The story is really weak in comparison to previous installments of the series, but that is nothing in comparison to the items that were passed onto the next installments in the series. From this point forward, it seemed that Square decided that the main characters had to be ambiguously emo at all times, and that the storylines had to be overly dramatic. The scene of Final Fantasy was changed forever. The storylines had to be structured like Final Fantasy, which in my own honest opinion made them weaker to boot. There is also the shoddy translation for the game itself. This was definitely a rush job, an effort to release the game as soon as possible for the PlayStation. Now, through all of this pandering and ranting, let me say this. Final Fantasy is a good game, and is truly worth a playthrough, but it's just not as impactful in my mind. The materia system is just a throwback to the Esper system from Final Fantasy VI, and other than the introduction to the 3D environment, expanded summons, and emo storylines, the only thing that was introduced and kept within the series was limit breaks, along with the modern setting, and I feel those are the only two items that I really appreciate from this game series-wide. Now, there are plenty of ways that you can play Final Fantasy VII. You have the original release on the PlayStation 1, the PSN release, a PC version that has a graphical upgrade thanks to some amazing hackers who in essence turned it into a late generation PlayStation 1 game as far as the graphics are concerned, and they have even done some retranslation work to make the story work a little bit better. Now join me next time as I anger the hardcore fans of Final Fantasy VII even more when I explain why I feel Final Fantasy VIII is actually a stronger entry to the series. Not really, guys. We'll get to Final Fantasy VIII a little bit later. First, we got a whole lot more Final Fantasy VII to talk about.